Welcome to Munro Musings. I am so happy to have you here. In this first episode, I am going to introduce you to myself and my philosophy, my journey, so that you can get to know a little more about me. My intention for this podcast is for you to see how I combine my eclectic background and experiences to help people find more alignment in the ways that they work, in the ways that they love, and the ways that they live. Another huge part of this work is about acts of rebellion. And that sounds a little weird, but I'm an Aquarius, and yes, you will be hearing some spiritual things, but I hope you'll stick around even if that's a little woo-woo for you. The way I see it is that acts of rebellion against your conditioning, your programming, your culture, your norms. Ways that you moved away from the ways you used to do things or maybe the way things were expected of you. And how by moving away from those things, by your acts of rebellion, how you came into more alignment, how that brought your gifts alive. And let's dive into that. So if you don't already know, my name is Krystal. I am the host of the Munro Musings podcast and the founder of the Munro Musings brand. Munro came to me because of my obsession with Outlander, actually. When I found Outlander, it changed my life. It made me more interested in history and cultures, in my own genealogy. It made me want to learn languages and know things. And I just felt so immersed. Not only did I love the characters in the story, but it just made me so fascinated with so many new topics. And this came at about the time I was starting my first business, and my formal education background, part of it, is in performance psychology. And we'll circle back to my formal education. And so there's a lot of talk about peak performance. And so I was thinking about peak performance and I was immersed in Outlander and Scotland and all these things. I came across this thing called Munro bagging, which is where you hike mountains in Scotland of a certain height. I want to say it's 3,000 feet. Something like that. It's called Munro bagging. You bagged by getting to the top of the Munro. And I was like, oh, this is a fun play on peak performance. So I stuck with Munro. And then Musings is because, and we'll get to my human design as well. In human design, I'm a self-projected projector. And that means I like to talk things out, hence the podcast. So Munro Musings is about climbing your own peak in your own way and a space for me to muse on any topics I feel like. Although they will tend to focus on peak performance, rebellion, people's journeys. I also will focus a lot on topics I'm passionate about that are doing things differently, if you can't catch that theme yet. Like regenerative agriculture and permaculture, using natural fibers and just different ways to think about things that maybe we hadn't thought about before. They're all actually things that I didn't grow up thinking about that came to me at some other time. I'll also focus on spiritual journeys and how our beliefs evolve. Mine evolve and are still evolving all the time. And I love to hear from people with different journeys and backgrounds and takes on spirituality, where they came from and what they believe now. And I'm just really excited to bring all of this to you so you can hear people's stories. And really my ultimate goal is for you to be inspired to choose to live your life in alignment. Martha Beck talks about this concept of nature versus culture. And I love that so much. I think she hit the nail on the head. Like, are you choosing your true nature? What is true for you, what is important to you, or are you going to keep going with the status quo, with culture? And again, culture can be your conditioning, the expectations that were made of you as a kid, what you think societal norms are, what the norms are within, your subgroups, anything like that. All right, so let's dive into my journey. Maybe let's talk about it chronologically for a few minutes. I grew up in Southern California. I played sports. And that's where this starts. So I started playing sports when I was 7. I played softball from the time I was 7 till I was 18. I actually quit my senior year of high school. And then my freshman year of high school, I found water polo. So I played water polo and swam my freshman year. And then I played water polo and softball my sophomore, junior, and senior years, minus when I quit softball mid-senior year. And we'll talk about quitting, okay? And so much of my childhood was wrapped up in sports. I was very good academically and I loved school, actually. but I also really loved sports, and it contributed to so many of my memories, good and bad. I had fantastic memories of sports. In sports, I also have really bad memories in sports. I had really bad things happen to me in sports. And so circling back to school, when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I grew up in a household where you had to go to college. There was no other options. It wasn't like debatable. It was just something you did. I see that now and I think it's kind of crazy. And I'm actually a huge advocate of not going to college. I'm sure we'll get to that. I just didn't know any better. And, all my teachers said go to college. My parents said go to college. And I was like the good girl who was going to do what they were told. So I was going to college. And I went in undeclared because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I never knew. I was not one of those kids who grew up being like, oh, I know I want to be this thing. I have a very strong affinity for animals and I've always loved them. And so everyone thought I should be a vet, but I didn't want to be a vet. I actually am pretty sure I've always had some sort of inner knowing that Western medicine was not it. And even though I didn't know how to verbalize that quite yet. So I knew I didn't want to be a vet. I actually handle emergencies and gore really well. So people thought, well, maybe like, can you work in the medical field? I could. I don't want to because, again, Western medicine wasn't it. So I went into college undeclared, and then I chose psychology during my first semester because I figured, well, I can use this anywhere, right? Like, you work with people, you want to understand them. No matter what I end up doing, I could use this. So I switched to psychology, and I ended up switching my major to kinesiology, which is the study of human movement. I came to realize that I did love anatomy and physiology. I had loved sports. I loved the human body. I like to know things. And I was really drawn to potentially going to chiropractor school or naturopathic medical school. So alternative medicine. And I was like, okay, I could actually live with that, right? I can help people and be in the health field through an angle that I find fascinating. So I started studying kinesiology, and that is what I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in. But while I was studying that, I ended up taking a sports psychology class that changed my life because it combined all that psychology knowledge that I had and the kinesiology stuff. It was all about sports, and it was like, oh my gosh, why did no one ever tell us this? I could have used this. I wish I would have had this, and I want to be able to pass this on to the next generation. I want youth athletes to have these skills. I want them to be able to cope with bad coaches, with situations they should never be put in, but unfortunately, many of them will be. And I want them to have coping skills. And not only for sports or for bad situations, but for stress in school or stress at home and for the future, because they're going to be adults one day, and why not teach them these skills when they're young? I was just so fascinated. I wished I had it. I had this light bulb moment. It's the story I always share, where I thought back to one of my coaches who used to say, this is 90% mental. Get your head in the game. And I was like, wow, he was yelling at us that this is 90% mental, but we were training physical skills 100% of the time. Why are we not training mental skills intentionally? Obviously, when you play sports, some of that comes along with it. You might get some grit and some tenacity and learn some focus just along the way. But what if you were doing it intentionally? And so that's really where sports psychology got its claws in me. And I was like, I am all in. And that was right at the end of my bachelor's degree. So I pivoted, and I had no idea how to get a job in sports psychology, especially with just a bachelor's degree. So I immediately applied for a master's program as soon as I was able to. Got into that master's program, immediately started doing internships, which was just fantastic to get to start out from the beginning. And I did a lot with youth athletes, which fills my cup up. And, it's just with youth athletes in sports psychology, it was a lot of, this is how you manage your emotions. Here's how you breathe. We did some coaching on how to talk to your coach, how to build up confidence or ask questions. And even with the little ones, especially when they're playing club, it's rough. How do you ask for more playing time? How do you ask what to work on? We're talking to 8-year-olds about this, which is insane to me, but also it's just part of it because that's that's the culture. And so how can I help these kids navigate the culture they're in? And then in addition to working with the youth athletes, I also worked with some collegiate athletes and higher level, like high school athletes about to go into college. That's really fun too, because at that point they are really looking for that edge. When you get into being very competitive, the physicality is not making that big of a difference. It is, how do you keep your head in the game? How do you focus on the right things? How do you come back after a failure, or how do you recover? It's these little things that really make that difference. I also consulted in a corporate setting, which was very new for me. I had worked in an office setting before, but for a small family business as an employee, not in sports psychology. And I had never worked in a real like corporate setting with cubicles and people in, professional attire, none of that. So it was very interesting to come in as a 22-year-old and teach these people who had way more, work experience than me, life experience than me, these mental skills. And I think that really informed my approach, where I always let people be the expert on themselves and on what they do. I don't know how to code. So I'm not here to tell you how to code. I am here to help you with how you think, how you approach it, prepping for presentations. I can help you with all of these other things, but you're the expert on you and your job. So it's really nice to have this collaborative approach with them and to get a feel for what people in that arena need help with performance-wise. Because again, my background was sports. This is my program. Around this time, I am engaged and getting married and became a military spouse. And for that time frame, we were in a very, I would call it a high tempo. I say we. He was in a high tempo job, very busy, rarely around. But man, did I get an inside view at the how things function or dysfunction, and the mental skills or lack of them, especially the higher people got. And even though I didn't formally work with any of them as clients, my expertise really grew through the informal conversations I was able to have during that time, where it's no longer winning or losing a game on the line. It's lives on the line. And again, as I had a firefighter dad, I have a lot of this EMS and military, and I have a lot of friends and family and conversations and background with people whose performance and mental abilities decide life or death. And for me, that A is a lot of pressure, but B is another fascinating angle on this mental performance side. So then I went back and got my doctorate. So I got my doctorate in sport and performance psychology. That is the long journey that I just finished, and I won't dive into all of that. But while I was learning the formal side of performance psychology, I always felt like there was this piece missing. It's so weird when I'm doing group sessions, all these people to do this thing the same way. All of you should set goals the same way, and all of you should communicate the same way, and all of you should. I just felt like it was not quite hitting the mark. Not like it was wrong, but it just didn't feel like it was quite everything I needed. A couple years later, I was going through my Saturn return, which if any of you are astrology people, that is usually a time for kind of reckoning, and it tends to be a hard period in life. It's about when you're 28 to 30-ish. And it tends to be this hard period in life that really tries to put you on your path if you're not living it. In that time frame, my dad died, I got divorced, and I had a really gnarly spiritual change, spiritual awakening. Just a lot of things emerged for me. And through that self-growth and personal development that I did, trying to find what went wrong in this relationship. What can I do differently next time? While there are plenty of things I could say that he did wrong, that doesn't help me. So it was very much this internal self-reflection of what did I do wrong? What could I do differently next time? Where was I not showing up appropriately? Where was I not speaking up, which is a huge theme for me? And what do I want? What do I want now that there's a whole world of options, and not just of future partners, but for me as a person to grow and change and evolve, and like what my life could look like. And through my own personal growth and development and that spiritual journey, I found human design. I've always been super into personality tests. I went through all of them, and I think they all give us a little bit of information. A couple of the things I really, really liked about human design is it is not based on your subjective answering of questions. So it's not going to change based on your mood. It's not going to change based on where you are in your life. Like, it is what it is, what it was when you were born. It's the energy that you came in with. It's also not just like, here's a bunch of information about yourself, because that's cool and that's a good first step, but it's not the only thing. So it is insightful and it gives practical tips as well. I also find it to be very empowering. It's not like you cannot do this, this, and this, or, you are incompatible with this person, or it's just, here's your natural operating system. Here's how your energy naturally works. Here's how you learn best. Why don't you try it out and see if it works better for you? It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And it was so eye-opening and helpful for me. It gave me so much peace and understanding. It allowed me to show up. It basically gave me permission to show up in the ways that I always felt inclined to, but thought were wrong. So we're going back full circle to this idea of nature versus culture. It gave me permission to align more with my nature and to kind of put the culture stuff to the side and be okay being weird. And my Aquarius self loves that, by the way. So I learned my human design, which I'm about to dive into. And I realized that learning my human design, or learning about human design in general, was the perfect piece of the puzzle to combine with performance psychology to personalize the approach. So the way I always say it now is that I help people optimize their performance in the most personalized way possible. So first, we're going to dive into your chart and we're going to understand, how does your energy work? How do you make your best decisions? How do you learn best? What environments are best for you? How do you work with people? Do you collaborate more? Do you work independently more? We're going to dive into all these things. And remember, human design is what you came in with. So it doesn't take into account any trauma you have or learned experiences or anything like that. But we're going to start with how you are wired. And from there, we're going to look at, what are your goals? What do you do? How can you take steps to align how you are wired with what you do? It's not about perfection. It's just about more alignment, because the more you're in alignment, the more you're in flow, the less you're in resistance. And that is my goal for everyone. How can you reduce resistance and find your flow in the ways that you work, in the ways that you love, in the ways that you live? So let's dive into my chart really quick. In human design, there are 3 pieces of the chart that are the most important. They're the first 3 that most people learn. And they're the ones where if you just focused on these 3, your life would change. Just experimented with them. And everything else would actually fall into place. But we're nosy, and if you're like me, I like to know all the things. So we're going to dive deeper than the first 3. The first piece is called type, and type is about how your energy works best. There are 5 types, and I am a projector. We're about 20% of the population, and we are meant to be leaders and guides. Our gift is not in how much we do. It is in what we see, our vision. It's in how we tweak systems or improve systems and help people improve, which, if this doesn't stand out to you, has obviously been my path, right? I wanted to learn about psychology because I wanted to learn how people work. And then I wanted to learn about kinesiology because I wanted to learn about how the body works. And then I went back to performance psychology to learn how you can use your mind to optimize performance. And then I learned these spiritual systems to help people like align with their soul and personalize it and optimize it even more for themselves. So I've always been on this path. I just didn't have the words for it. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but projectors see, like, they have this bird's eye view and they see how systems can be tweaked and improved. And it's their feedback. It's their insights. That's what their gift is. And that just felt so relieving for me. They also have energy that ebbs and flows. So we're really, really efficient when we work. And I think it was taught that projectors should only work 3 hours a day. Maybe that's true, but I work a lot more than that. I do need a lot of rest. I find that I can do what most people do in a day in a couple of hours. And then I need a little bit of a break, whether that's filling my cup up with, reading some fiction or going for a walk, doing a workout, whether that's actually just relaxing, whatever that is. But energy ebbs and flows. The efficiency is very, very high with the work that they do. So strategy is how you bring about the most aligned opportunities, and it's attached to your type. So all projectors have the same strategy. And my strategy is to wait for the invitation, which has probably been the hardest thing to wrap my brain around, and something is still like a work in progress because, as it sounds, I'm meant to wait to be invited, which means that even though I see all these things that could fix something for somebody, I'm not meant to give that unsolicited advice. And I have learned the hard way in the past, again, before I had words for it, how much I get repelled when I am, giving this deep insight to somebody who didn't want it. And this is probably a little bit of a graphic way to explain this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Projectors have very penetrating energy. And even though it's energy that we're talking about, most people don't want to be penetrated without permission. And that is how I've had to tell it to myself. I don't have a better way to put it. So be invited first. Get consent first. That's my message here. And that has been what I've had to tell myself. And there's a lot of biting of the tongue, okay? There's a lot of like, man, I could solve hours of your problems in 5 minutes right now, but you're not asking me. So I'm bitter that you're not asking me, that you don't see me, but I know I'll be even more bitter if I spend the energy and the time to verbalize and share this with you, and then you not only don't do it, but then you avoid me because you didn't appreciate that interaction. So it's been a learning curve for me. And I also learned, I did a stint of time in some direct sales, and any sales really, especially cold sales, reach outs. Projectors should not do reach outs. I shouldn't even say that. You can do them if you want. I just don't think they're going to be well received. They're probably not going to be well received. And so I learned that about me, and that's why I struggled a lot, because I'm meant to wait to be invited. And there's some leeway here with what that means or what that looks like. To me, if someone is listening to this podcast, they're inviting me. Like, if you're here listening, you're inviting me to share what I'm sharing. You're inviting, like, you are here to listen to what I have to say. That's not me forcing my opinion on you. If someone's following me on social media, they have opted in, they have invited me to share with them, right? But it's that personalized thing. Like, if I'm not going to go send an unsolicited cold DM to somebody, giving them advice. Now, you might have caught the word I said earlier, which was bitter. We're going to go to that next. In human design, there are signposts that tell you when you're on track or off track. And for projectors, the sign that you are on track is success. Do you feel successful? Oftentimes, again, this is personalized. What does success mean to you, not what it looks like in culture? So a lot of times for projectors, what feels like success, being invited to share their gifts, being seen and acknowledged and recognized for what they see and the gift they bring and how they improved something. Recognizing that in somebody is them feeling successful. I feel so successful when someone is like, oh my gosh, like, what you said changed my life. That feels successful to me. It doesn't have to be that, but it can be. Whatever feels like success to you, what fills you up, lights your, like, whatever makes you feel successful as a projector, telling you you're on track, you're doing the right thing. But when projectors are off track, they feel bitter. Bitterness is the sign that we are off track. And usually bitterness comes when we are not being seen, we're not being recognized, we're not being invited to share our gifts. And so there comes this dilemma a lot, and I see a lot of this with projectors, and I felt it at first too, where we're like, okay, so how, if I have to wait to be invited, do I not feel bitter about not being seen? And how do I get seen without imposing myself? But that's why I led with the thing about social media or whatever it is that you do. So you get to be a lighthouse. You are shining your light. You get to put your work out into the world. You share what you see broadly, and people can come to you. And then they can ask you for direction, for guidance, for that specific advice for themselves. So you do put your work out into the world. You put it in front of people, whether it's on a podcast or on social media or in networking groups or whatever that is, whatever that looks like. You put your work out into the world, and then people can invite you for the more specific guidance. Next, the really big piece that I would encourage you when you learn yours to practice with is called authority or inner authority. That is the way that you make the most aligned decisions. And it's not from your mind. It's not from your brain. It's not from pro and con lists. It is from your body. And everyone has a very specific one. There are 7 different ones. I already told you earlier, I am a self-projected projector, or I have talk it out authority. And that means that I legitimately make my decisions by verbalizing my thoughts. This is only about 2% of the population. And that doesn't mean that people without this authority can't talk things out. It just means it's not the way that they are meant to make the most aligned decisions. For me, this is a decision-making process, not just a process, if that makes sense. So I like to give this picture of ball of yarn. And in my brain, when I'm trying to make a decision, it is a knotted, jumbled up ball of yarn that's a mess. And my brain is just like thoughts like this, right? Like all over the place. But actually formulating sentences makes me pull it out one word at a time to make it cohesive words. And so I'm processing as I'm pulling the string out with my words. And as it's coming out, I am listening to what's coming out, and it just comes to me. It's either in the pitch or the tone of my voice. I can hear like a level of excitement or a truth, and I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's it. Or as I'm talking something out, the answer just comes to me. And so for people like me with this particular decision-making process, or anyone who likes to talk things out with somebody, here's a tip. Say, hey, I really want to talk something out. I'm not really looking for advice. I just really need someone to process this with. Are you available for that? Game changer. I'm telling you, with this authority, it's a super game changer, but it's a game changer for anyone. I will tell you that this is amazing for relationships. And if you're on the other side and someone starts talking to you, feel free to ask, hey, were you asking me for advice, or were you just wanting to talk this out? And did you need someone to listen? Just ask. Just tell. Game changer. Okay. So now we've covered type, strategy, and authority, which again were the 3 pieces I said are instrumental to starting your human design journey, to start experimenting with, see how they go for you. It will bring your life into so much more alignment if you just focus on those 3 things. I'm going to go into a couple more pieces because I think the way this podcast is set up, episodes where I have a guest, we're going to go through their journey of their business or their relationship or whatever it is we're talking about. And we're going to be guided by those, moments of rebellion, but I'm going to weave in their chart because I want you to see how it plays out in real life. How some people, when they're going through their own personal growth journey, they end up making some of these decisions on their own or doing some of these things without ever hearing about human design. And for other people, learning about it gives them a light bulb moment. We're like, oh yeah, okay, I can really, double click on this one thing. And so my goal with these episodes is not only for you to learn from amazing people and hear their journey and how acts of rebellion can bring you more in alignment with your nature versus culture. It's also about how your human design weaves in. whether it's the parts that you've already come to incorporate, or maybe there's a new piece for the next step. So the next part of the chart, of my chart that I'm going to talk about, is called profile. Profile is a piece of your chart that tells you kind of the role you're here to play, how you align with your purpose, and a little bit about how you learn best. There are 6 different numbers and everyone has 2 of them, and it looks like a fraction when you're looking at your chart. For me, I am a 5-1. The 5 line is about being an innovative problem solver. We are also known as the heretic, and that's like the traditional human design lingo. I highly recommend you don't get caught up in the jargon because it's weird. As a 5 line, knowing there's this heretic-like energy and that I'm meant to be an innovative problem solver, kind of like the superhero, people project a lot onto the 5s where they're like, they expect you to save the day and solve everything. And when you let them down, that's when you become the heretic and, burned at the stake, figuratively these days, but still. So it's really important for me to be very clear with what my offerings are, what I can and can't do, what problem I am here to solve, what problems I can't solve, because I don't want to let people down or have this miscommunication about like expectations. The 5 line is also meant to be very consultative energy. So swoop in, save the day, solve the problem, swoop back out. In addition to that, I have the 1 line. 1 lines love to get to the bottom of things. They love research. They love knowledge. They are obsessed with learning. Hello, doctorate in performance psychology. So we have this deep need for information and knowledge and understanding things. I don't like to be put on the spot because I want to look up the answer. I want to research something. I want to look at a bunch of angles. I want to go down the rabbit hole. And it's not just one thing. Everyone's different. But for me, there's performance. There is mindset, this mental performance side of things. I am very much into rabbit holes around spirituality and different beliefs. I'm also into the, alternative, AKA traditional, like old school traditional health stuff, like getting back to nature. I'm also into permaculture and regenerative agriculture and the ways that we can work with nature in the way nature functions, because we are nature. And if it's not clear to you, all of these things actually come back to the systems. I love improving systems and aligning with more natural systems. That's sort of my niche here. That's important for me to know, right? That I need to be very clear on expectations. I need to allow myself the time to be a nerd and go down all the rabbit holes that fill my cup up, that it's okay, that I like to do that. And to understand that my role might be one where I don't solve people's problems all day, every day, or not the same people's, but that I swoop in and give some advice and then swoop out and do my own thing or go spend more time learning or helping somebody else. So knowing that has helped me design my business, and to not be so hard on myself for not fitting all the molds that I think are expected of me. The next piece is called definition. And definition tells a lot about how we work with other people and how we process information. So definition, there are 4 different ones. Mine is called split definition or collaborative definition. And so what that means is I tend to feel more whole when I'm around other people's energy. And that doesn't mean I want to be around people all the time. I don't, if you can see the look of disgust. I love my own time, my own alone time. Even as a projector, that's a piece I didn't talk about. We are meant to go be away from some of the more energized beings to get that out of our system. But what it does mean is that when I want to be creative or when I'm feeling stuck, I might really benefit from being around the energy of other people. That's why I often like to do creative work in a coffee shop. I can put my headphones in. I don't need to talk to anybody, but I want their energy around. It also means that I really enjoy collaboration. I really do. There's a time and a place for head down work or writing, working on a book right now. All that stuff can be done without collaboration, or at least without constant collaboration. But I do enjoy, on top of the collaboration, the verbal processing. So for me, this banter and verbal problem solving and even like, hey, what if? I love playing off of ideas. I love all of that. I thrive on it. So for me, knowing that helps. It also helps me to understand that like half of the people aren't like that. They're like, I'm good on my own. Why are we having a meeting? Stop talking. You're interrupting my flow. Like, back up. The other part that I mentioned about definition is it tells you about how you process information. And so the more breaks you have in your definition, the slower you process. So for me, what this looks like often is that I'll process something in the moment and have some thoughts. But then a day or two later, like I'm out for a walk or I'm in the shower or I'm like just having, no inputs. And I have an aha moment where that thing was fully processed from a day or two ago. And then I want to come back and revisit it. Sometimes I feel like people think, particularly in romantic partnership, but this can happen at work too, where people are like, oh my God, why can't you just let it go? Or why do you want to bring this up again? But I hadn't fully processed it yet, and now I have new thoughts. So it's something I have to be aware of with myself, how I present it to people. And so basically you need to know you, and you need to know that other people are different. That's a huge piece of this. There are so many other parts of human design that I could go into, but I think that's enough. That is like what a core reading from me is like. And I don't really do readings. I do coaching sessions. So when I'm working with someone, those are the parts I tend to really dive deep on, because they set up so much of how do you use your energy and interact with other people, and how do you understand yourself, and how do you process information, and do you work with other people, and then practical application. How does that look, and how can you apply that in your life, and where can you and where can't you? And we work together to problem solve that. And there's so much more. Human design can go into, do you work better in small teams or big teams or solo? And what gifts do you bring to those teams? And, what strengths do you have all of the time versus some of the time? And there's things about environment and digestion and routines, and it gets way deeper. But for today, for this introduction to this podcast and to me, I think that's where I want to leave it on my human design, so that you just know a little more about me.
I actually realized I got into a really big flow when I was recording this initial episode, and I missed a few things. So I wanted to hop back in here and cover a couple of things, mostly around the modalities that I use and my philosophy. So starting with the modalities, I know I've already mentioned a little bit about my background with sports psychology and human design, but what I really wanted to talk to you about is what those things are. Sports psychology is basically the mental side of sport. It is how do you enhance performance on the mental side, the psychological side. When we're talking sports psychology, we're talking specifically to enhancing the mental performance in sport. But there's also performance psychology, which is the mental performance of basically anything else. When we learned it in school, we learned it with performing artists or business people or military. But I believe these are all just life skills that can apply for any of us at any time. Some of these mental skills include things like goal setting, communication, energy management, focus, attentional control. It's just all those things that it's almost expected of you to have learned, but you never intentionally trained. Like I mentioned before with my light bulb moment when I realized that coaches were saying that this is mental, but we weren't training anything mental. So it is all of those mental skills that people need in whatever it is that they do. It's the resilience, it's the grit, it's the intentional usage of your mind to enhance whatever you're doing. Now, human design is a system. It's kind of like any other personality type system that you've heard of, except it's based on your time, date, and place of birth. So instead of filling out a subjective questionnaire that could change based on your mood or your season of life, your human design was determined at the moment of your birth. And it is like your energetic blueprint. It tells you how you were wired to thrive, how you were meant to operate at your best. It is literally your blueprint for optimizing everything. Now, that being said, human design, because it is what you came in with, doesn't fully account for your life experiences, your traumas, your habits, and all of these things. And so I like to work with an eclectic combination of modalities. That's why I have the sciencey background with sport and performance psychology. That is why I have human design for your energetic blueprint. How does your individual energy work? And I bring in some other modalities like parts work, where it gives us a language and a framework to work with. You'll notice that a lot of these concepts are archetypal and they give us language to really explain what we want, what we need, and how to express ourselves in a more clear way. You'll also find that they are a lot of permission giving. They're giving you permission to be yourself, to not have to conform to the way that you've seen things done, to the way you think that it is expected of you to do things. It is all about you personalizing your approach to optimize your performance and therefore removing resistance and removing friction in your life and finding more ease and finding more flow in the ways that you're showing up, whether that's in your romantic partnerships, in your friendships, in any type of relationship. So, in love, in life, in career, any area, these are meant to help you find more alignment, more flow, and just face less resistance. And when I initially started learning about sport and performance psychology, and I was thinking about how you can optimize your performance. At first, I was thinking, oh, then you could get more done, right? If you do more things quickly, you can do more things. But now I've come to understand that it's not just about being able to get more done and be more productive and do more and do more and do more. It's about having more time to be. It's about having more time to enjoy. It's about not being so run down by fighting constant battles against yourself that you can enjoy your life. And for me, that is why I like to bring the sport and performance psychology, the mental skills side to regular people. It doesn't have to be professional athletes or elite performers of any kind, although it can be. It is for moms and dads and partners, and it is for anyone with a job or a career or goals or passions. Maybe you have a hobby that you want to get better at, whatever it is. However, you are showing up, it's there for you to optimize. My philosophy is about growing your self awareness and taking intentional action. So I use these modalities as tools to help grow self awareness. Can you learn more about yourself? Do you know where you're at and where you want to go? Do you know what's holding you back? Do you know what your blocks are? Do you know your default mode that's keeping you stuck? Are you aware of all of these things? Are you aware of the tools that can help you get out of that? And then, are you actually taking action and using those tools? Are you taking action towards the direction you want to go? Are you taking action to change your habits? Are you taking action to change how you show up? Are you choosing to do things differently because the way you've been doing them isn't working? It either has never worked and you're trying on somebody else's, or it worked for you for a time and now that season has passed and you need a new way to show up. So again, my philosophy boils down to something very simple, but not always easy, which is developing your self-awareness and then taking intentional action. Thank you for bearing with me through the wardrobe change and the little add-on here.
If you also feel like you are on your own personal growth journey, you want to learn more about yourself, if you feel alone in that you constantly feel like you either have to conform to cultural expectations, but you know that you're wired differently, you are in the right place. I hope you are so inspired by our guests, their stories. I hope you learn more about your design. If you want to work with me, you can see the link in the show notes. You can go to my website. I work with people one-on-one. I work with couples, and I also come in and do corporate workshops, team trainings. Make sure you subscribe so that every week when we release a new episode on Monday, it is ready for you to listen. I hope it starts your week off in the best way possible. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.